Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of Gavin's Great Idea. I've got Evan Regan-Levine on the show today. I'm really excited that you're here. It's going to be an awesome conversation. This episode was recorded on Friday, October 9th, 2020. Hope you guys have a great time listening. Thanks so much. Bye. Before, Evan, I'll let you talk real quick. I've got a special guest with me today. Say hi to everybody.
Hi.
So this is Evan Daniels. She's with me today. She's been going to school here at Wingate Hughes. And I just wanted to give her a chance to say hi to everybody. Thanks, Ella. Evan.
Gavin.
Welcome to Gavin's Great Ideas. I'm really glad you're here. Thanks for being on, man.
Thanks for having me. This is really an interesting idea in and of itself. So really thrilled to be here.
Cool. So look, everybody, the format of this is going to be a conversation. Evan's got some things he wants to talk about. I've got some things I want to talk about. One thing that we've all agreed on in creating this is not going to be a boring question and answer. Evan, I don't care about your backstory right now. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what you've done. I want to hear about some ideas. So let's kick it off. Give me a great idea, something awesome you've been working on.
All right. So something awesome I've been working on. I think, like a lot of the rest of us in the real estate world, the pandemic has really thrown us for a loop and just thinking through what the hell do we do with, with office buildings, with residential buildings, with the future, where is it headed? And I think that this has been a shakeup more than the way we've seen shakeups in the past through whether it was the great financial crisis or the tech wreck or any other kind of recession. This is somehow in so many ways different, and where my latest ideas come from is really, sitting back and, at JVG thinking about what do we do with national landing? Does this kind of put any of our plans on hold? Does it make us stop thinking about transforming that market? And I think that really it made us think about how do we change it differently? And so my latest idea is how do we bring 5G and smart city connectivity into national landing?
I think that's fantastic. Now, a lot of people are talking about future of smart cities and they talk about really vague things like we just need more technology and we need people to access it more, but you can cut through a lot of that bullshit, right? And really tell us what is happening. What's one of the big ideas that you've had that you really think is that you can explore in national landing?
I think, Gavin, you're 100% right. When we first started thinking about smart cities and we hear everyone talk about them, I think everyone in our business does. And the first thing we realized is, well, no one actually can tell me what this does. And a lot of it is like you said, it's total bullshit. There's not a lot there about, what do you actually do with it that's not a parlor trick? And so we actually figured, like we usually do, let's not listen to the industry rags and the, Q&A sessions and the panels and say, let's actually go to the source. And, having Amazon in our portfolio, talking to a lot of other tech companies, we started to say, all right, what do you actually care about? What do you want? And the thing that came up over and over again, and you can see it just based on what we're doing here, is that connectivity matters. And so we started thinking about things like 5G, but I'll tell you the biggest idea wasn't mine, but it's one that we really ran with. I was having a conversation with a professor at Virginia Tech, and, we'd flown down to meet with them and talk about how they were going to bring, their programming to the innovation campus in Alexandria. And after one of the meetings, we started talking about, hey, we want to make smart city and connectivity investments because we, learned that connectivity mattered. This guy, Jeff Reed, he grabs me and he says, you really ought to think about buying spectrum. And at this point, I'd never heard what spectrum was. And now we're sitting here and JVG's just bought $25 million of air, which is also something I never thought I'd convince anyone to do.
Not air rights, not air rights, but actual air.
Literal air. And it's basically the way to think about it is that we're investing in a different kind of real estate. And that kind of real estate is the right to broadcast 5G signal over airwaves. And we think that matters for a lot of reasons. We can talk about that, but I think that kind of interesting idea just popped up and it's part of smart city. It's part of the city of the future and the way people will use space and what drives technology companies. But at its core, it's just kind of an out of left field idea that we think is going to be totally transformative over several years when used in the right way by the right kind of people and companies.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you kind of knew what the problem was when you started this, but you had to figure out what the problem was, right? Before you could even begin to have an idea.
It's so true. I think so many people come into the tech space, and I'm not one of them, but I, get to meet a couple people who do this. And a lot of times I feel like everything is just a solution looking for a problem. And that's kind of constantly over and over again, especially in the prop tech space, people coming into us and pitching ideas to solve problems we don't have. And I think we started here with, one of the really fundamental tenets of, this coming kind of fourth industrial revolution, which is what a lot of people call it, is that there's really not a really good way for companies who develop for it to test their products, to develop IoT devices on networks,
Yeah.
because everything's owned by carriers or it's owned in university labs. And we said, what if we brought that ability to, be on private networks that were wireless, that had the speed of 5G, that people could also test on and develop technologies on. And we took a bet that bringing that outside of the university lab and off of just primarily carrier networks would
Yeah.
help us give innovative people the sandbox they needed, which at the end of the day comes back to our fundamental idea that, we want to be a real estate provider for innovative companies. And if this is just a different kind of real estate that helps them use our traditional real estate, why not do it?
Yeah. Yes. So this is a way, I mean, you've got old buildings, like a lot of old buildings down there. You're building some new badass buildings, right? But you've got a real aging infrastructure. When you're thinking about your idea for bringing 5G to National Landing, you can't just say, well, let's rebuild all the buildings perfectly, can you?
No, not at all.
They've got to have the infrastructure for them. And for those of you out there that are still trying to figure out 5G, Evan, tell them what 5G is, why
Sure
it's so
thing.
different, why it actually is
So
better
people
than
read
4
about
or
this
2.
all the time. Yeah, it's in the G's. It's confusing.
What
So
the heck is
basically,
it?
5G is the fifth generation of wireless technology,
Right.
right? And so when you look at your phone, it says 4G or it says LTE, which is our fourth generation of technology. And there's been basically these progressions along the way, and that gets to in a second to our question about buildings. But basically, what 5G is it's a wireless standard that allows for the very high speed, very low latency transmission of data. And it also allows for massive device density. Now, if
Yeah.
you're thinking that, what the hell is massive device density? Why does that matter? Anyone here who's ever been to a Caps game and sits down and tries to take a great picture of, of the ice and really get close to a player and send it out to one of their friends realizes they might not have signal. And that's not, a lot of the theories are, well, it's because, it was Verizon Center and Verizon blocks everyone else out. And, really the deal there is that, like most sporting events, you see it at Nats Park or anywhere else, we have a lot of people. We have so many devices that are connected. All of them basically overwhelm the available device density. And if we're going to move to a world where everything's connected, you're going to have your washer and dryer connected wirelessly. You're going to have your phone. You're going to have your keys. Anything you can think of, your glasses are going to be connected. Mm-hmm. And so 5G is needed not just because it's really, really fast and because it has low latency, which means the time from when I send a piece of information out and when it comes back. It really means also that it can support an entire new network of infrastructure, which is how it really connects to the built environment. And that's why it's transformative.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that made me help me understand it was literally the measurements, right? A 4G would be about the wavelength would be about that long. With a 5G, so it could fit the data on that wavelength, right? 5G's wavelength is like that, which means it has a higher frequency, I assume, and it also can carry more data at a faster speed. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, and Verizon would call it millimeter waves. There's actually
right.
different types of 5G signal.
Okay.
And so when you think about millimeter wave, that's great. It carries an unbelievable amount of data very, very quickly with low latency. It does all this magical stuff that makes 5G so special. Yeah. But it doesn't do well by passing through glass or stone or steel. It's actually doesn't propagate very well, and it doesn't go over long distances.
Okay. So let me think back to LED technology for a second. When LED lights became the big thing, to me, they were kind of a failure at the beginning because we were trying to use LED lights in traditional light fixtures with the same kind of reflector, the same kind of things. And the light output from an LED diode is very different than a fluorescent tube or an incandescent filament. Then as it evolved years later, you get light fixtures that are made for LED that actually are better output, better product and everything, instead of just trying to swap out a damn bulb. When you think about 5G and how you're actually going to integrate it, how do we skip that step in your buildings? Because if you're telling me that you can't get the millimeter waves into your building, am I going to just have to deal with a bunch of ugly stuff all over my building first until you can actually make it pretty?
Yeah, it was a big question we were asked at the beginning and that we were asking ourselves. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons, I guess, backing up for a second, that we're even interested in doing this. And people ask all the time, why does a real estate company care about this? And I think the reason we care, obviously, is because we want to attract the best tenants, like any other real estate company in the world. But more than that, we said, we've got this opportunity. It's got HQ2, it's got Virginia Tech's Innovation Campus. But the most important thing, to Gavin's point, is that we control the majority of what's in between those two things. Yeah. And we control buildings, we control open spaces, we control some portions of roads and streets. We said, if we really want to invest in connectivity, well, we have the ability to put the fiber in that has to go to all these little transmitters for 5G. And by the
Okay.
way, 5G transmitters, the antennas have to be pretty close together because the waves don't travel that far and they need to be
Right.
repeated. So you don't just have the cell phone tower with the fake tree shit on the side of it. You actually have to have like these little, they look like little flying saucers, and you have to have
Okay.
those in a bunch of different places.
Okay.
So we said, we're in a good position to do this because we control a lot of buildings that are close together. And so
Right.
that let us start thinking about, how do you do concealed mounts? How do you do things in street furniture? How do you do things with working with Arlington County on light posts, but even building side mounts and making things designed intentional look like architectural embellishments. But because
Okay.
you have more of them, they can be smaller, they can fit behind things, they can be screened. There are a lot of different concealment technologies. But to your point about the old
That's
buildings,
awesome.
it doesn't matter that the buildings are old, because think about it, we're on the 5th generation of wireless technology. Imagine how much crap is
Yeah.
in those buildings going back to just plain old telephone service.
Oh, you got to pull all that
Wire.
stuff out,
Got to
right?
pull it all out.
Yeah.
Well, we know what that creates. It's the rooms, routes, and risers. It's the pathways through the building where you can put the
Gotcha.
infrastructure to just repeat that 5G signal inside. But if I want to
Okay.
do it, if I'm just one carrier, I've got to go. If I'm Verizon, who we would love to partner with, and AT&T, we'd love to partner with, T-Mobile, all these other groups.
Right.
We're going to them and saying, look, we have a whole city that you can put your antenna everywhere. You can put them on the sides of the buildings. You can run them through the buildings, and you can deliver a quality of service in a 5G environment that doesn't exist in a city at that scale anywhere else.
Right.
And that's where the big idea is saying these guys can come in and retrofit these buildings because we control the pathways, the fiber, the power, the rooms, the routes, the risers, everything it takes to bring that signal in, we control it.
And it has a dope underground mall that's underutilized.
We're not going to talk about the underground mall today.
Oh, sorry.
It's on mine. Do not ask.
Okay, gotcha. So I want to step back for a second. As you started to identify the problem, it was you wanted to create this playground. You wanted to create a place where anything was possible technologically. You knew you could control the environment. You could control what was happening, but you also knew you had to drive leases. You had to get people to want to be there. Yeah, it's one thing to get a HQ2 there, but you still had to keep that going, and all the other wonderful things y'all did. As you think about the problem, what I like about the solution that you came up with is you didn't say, let's just invent something brand new. So many people try to think they can't figure out the idea, or they have to figure out the idea on their own. Like, I have to come up with something completely new, when sometimes the best ideas are really the ones that you layer on things that you can find, like 5G. You knew what the problem was over time that you wanted to solve. So y'all went out and found the solution in 5G and found a way to make it work, right?
It's true. And it's funny, like this didn't come out of a vacuum in
Yeah.
any way. And it wasn't something that we had this brilliant idea. I mean, you can't open, the newspaper today or go online and read the news without seeing some reference, whether it's to global power competition between, Huawei and the United States over this kind of stuff, or
Right.
even just the evolution of 5G technology and even the growth of things like cloud computing and cybersecurity, which we realize, our region is already a leader in.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of context, and everything is about context. The 5G idea, I really give a lot of credit to being pushed by one of my colleagues, Adam Rashid, who co-heads the Smart City Initiative with me. He's my partner in all of this. And he said, he's my Gavin to your Gavin a little bit there. But
Yeah.
he said, Evan, like, this really matters. It's more than just the rest of connectivity. We really need to find a way to do this. And in talking to people who, know what they're doing, who know about this, we start to refine the idea. It wasn't perfect being birthed. It basically had to be shaped. Right. And the more time we spent talking to different experts and different people, we really made it about talking to the practitioners. We had no interest in working with a bunch of theoretical consultants, after a very early stage, because those guys had no idea how to build this. So we went and we talked to the guys who were actually deploying 5G networks all over the country. We talked to someone who helped build the iPhone. We talked to people at these tech companies. So what do you do with this? How does this matter? Why does it matter? And it shaped our thinking. So it wasn't a fully formed like problem and solution. The problem was, how do we get more tech companies to come behind HQ2? How do we, develop this into a real hub like a Kendall Square? And because from this germ of, connectivity matters, led us to, let's create a sandbox, using the work that Virginia Tech does, using all these things that we can do to support it. But It's been so refined along the way by so many different people. And it happens. I mean, I can tell you every day, I'm going to be in 3-4 hours of meetings about this today with different people, just continually evolving and refining that approach.
That's awesome. I mean, what an inspiring place to work and stuff to deal with. I want to step back, take a breath for a second, and talk about where ideas come from for you. when you have done this so many times over your career. When you and I first met, our good friend Andy O'Brien introduced us back in the day, said we need to be pals, right? You had just built the most expensive spec suite in the market with the most expensive furniture, and then leased it for the highest dollar amount at that time in the whole region, right? You've
Yep.
had these ideas over time. Talk about like, where the hell does Evan come up with this stuff?
Honestly, it's kind of funny, Gavin. For me, I don't come from a business background. So my background, educationally is in social sciences. I was really interested in politics. I didn't come into this thinking I was going to be a real estate guy. I thought I was going to go do God knows what else, journalism or
Yeah,
lobbying or something. And I got fascinated with it because I feel like our industry touches so many different aspects of society. And, it's really a reflection of society and the economy. And I know that sounds kind of broad and highfalutin, but to
hmm,
me, so much of what we do, even down to the design elements, you mentioned the spec suite, it had a lot of interesting design classics. The way I like to think about the world and where I get my ideas all comes from context. I love to
yeah,
read. I love to talk to smart people who do different things. I was on a panel discussion
yeah,
the other day with a venture capital fund who basically is investing in the newest generation of space technology. Now, how the hell am I going to do anything with that in my day job? But I wanted to learn about what are smart people thinking about around how to build the commercial version of the International Space Station. And so the more you read, the more you're able to make connections, the more you're able to talk about things. You have to see it in context because real estate is something that is a reflection of the broader society. It's not what drives it. And so if you want to be successful in coming up with, I think, real estate ideas that are
yeah,
innovative and that are cutting edge, or even the way we talked to Amazon, when we brought them in and convinced them that Crystal City, which, people had famously called a shithole in so many ways, was not, but actually was a place that had tremendous potential. You have to be able to think beyond the bricks and sticks and beyond just the real estate context. That's where a lot of the ideas come from. And whether it's admiring, a great piece of design or trying to build a mid-century modern house or reading
mhm,
about, the history of why Bethlehem steel failed and thinking through the social implications of that, you can draw from so many different sources, but it's ultimately having that library of context that lets you say, hey, let me think outside of the proverbial real estate box and build something truly special.
yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things for me is I think through the idea generation part, we can often get really cynical and look at all the things that didn't work and say, see, I knew that wouldn't work. And look at people's failures, and almost take satisfaction in that because we didn't bring an idea to it, but we know all the things that won't work. And I think the approach of saying, here's all the stuff that has worked for people. Here's the things that people have tried and done is really an important way to look at things. Um, and then take off of that and build from that. I think it's, I mean, like you're saying, it's important to learn from failures. But I try to look at that optimistic standpoint and say, what can we do? And then look past the part that says, okay, I had the idea, but I have no idea what to do with it. And a lot of people that I've met over the years in the tech sector, there's been a big mix. Half of them are really protective of any idea they come up with. Don't want to share it, don't want to talk about it to anyone because they're afraid that somebody might take it. Then there's the other half that talk to everybody about it and they share it and they develop it and they build it. Those are the ones that I've found are the most successful because they're not worried about someone taking it because they're about to do it. And for me, when I'm coming up with ideas, just look, it's just I'm an architect, I'm a designer. Um, the faster I can get it out, the better. Because once I feel like once I've birthed that idea and it comes out and it's there and I can see it, then I can do something else. But I kind of have to get it out of my head. Do you kind of work like that where you start thinking about it and you're like, okay, if it stays in my head, it's going to go away or it's going to turn into something that's not good. But if I get it out, I can do something with it, develop it, or even come up with another one.
I mean,
Do you
I'm
work
I'm
like,
definitely the latter. I
yeah,
love to sort of try and push it out, and it depends. It depends on certain ideas. Basically, have a moment, and maybe they have a moment, and that's aligned with the moment that you're standing in, and you can say, "Hey, I could do this right now." There can be some that you dream of that you think about. Hey, this could really make a lot of sense, or this could revolutionize the way people do things. And sometimes you have to shelve those because it's not the right moment. But shelving them doesn't mean putting them away forever and never telling anyone about it. And I think there's this complex that a lot of people have. They think, oh, well, we're all a bunch of Steve Jobs and we've come up with this unbelievable idea. And, I'm just going to keep this thing so close and not budge or be moved by the opinions or the thoughts of others. And I think, unfortunately, the reality is not every kid gets to be an astronaut. Not all of us are Steve Jobs. And, we're sitting here talking about ideas.
Right.
We're not, we don't have our covers on our faces on inspirational quotes or the covers of books yet. And I think one of the things that's so fascinating about that method.
Did y'all notice he said yet? I like that.
I'm talking about Gavin here.
Yeah.
I can see that face on a book. Look, I think candidly, like one of the things that's so special about the place where I work and JBG in general, and I give a lot of credit to Matt Kelly, our CEO, for really pushing this, is there's a lot of relentless sort of testing of ideas, and that's everything. That's asset management all the way through property management, through development, through investment. And I think the people who love working there love it because if you have an idea like that, you can get it out and you can just be ready for a lot of people to shit on it. And you can have people say, this is why this won't work, or this is why maybe I think it will. And that debate and that exchange of ideas, if you really believe in that and you think you can execute it, you have no reason to not share it with other smart people who can pick it apart and push you in the right direction, because it's not perfectly formed. It doesn't come out perfectly. And you have to say, how can I, through debate and discussion, move something forward? And one of the things that's always stuck with me about Matt since he hired me, and over the years I've worked at JBG, is really that, the ultimate goal is to get to the right answer. It's not about whether it's my answer or your answer. It's about how do we figure out the right approach? And that means being open to really smart people picking holes in what you're doing and saying, hey, this is fucking stupid and you shouldn't do it this way. But, maybe if we did it that way. And that argument, that's what creates, I think, great ideas.
Yeah, we have a rule here at the office. Whenever you present a design idea, everybody in the room has to say why it might work first. It's easy to just say, no, it won't work. Well, no, how might it work? And then if we figure out all the reasons it might work, we kind of figure out whether or not it's the right solution or not. Just because it might work and you might be able to do it doesn't mean it's the right idea, but it's a much better way to approach it. So Faizan Qureshi has a question for you. How do you get your ideas out? How do you sell your ideas? And I think that, like, for you at JBG, you've got a better process for that, but give some advice to some folks that might work for a real estate company or some other kind of company that maybe isn't as welcoming of ideas. And that
I think you have to find the people that you want to get your idea out to. And that means sometimes that means going outside of the normal process. It means not just saying, hey, I'm going to sit at my desk and hope that, I raise the flag and someone comes over and they love my idea and they make it.
Right.
Sometimes it's not often about doing it just in your own career, your own role. It can be about going out, Gavin, I'll come grab you and say, Gavin, let's go grab a coffee. I want to talk about something. I have a crazy idea.
Yep.
And it's finding those people who you surround yourself with, and you can start to basically build up that network of folks. And, maybe your idea doesn't get made where you are, but it's also, maybe your idea gets made somewhere else or made at a different company or in a different context. And I think that's where, without that network, you can't just rely on the people who, you come into your sort of day-to-day work life with. You've got to go out to the broader world. And if someone isn't interested in your idea where you are, just because that's your day job and that's your business card doesn't mean that you can't go out to someone who might be interested and talk about what that is, because, you never know where that leads.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I think the other part that I would put around it is taking off what you were saying. It's not like you take the idea and hope somebody else does something with it. To me, one of the things I've learned sometimes the hard way is if I'm going to bring an idea to the table, I damn well better have thought it out. And I better have gone through all of my own iterations and my own critique to help prove it. Look at the business case for it. Why would it work? Why is it a great idea? What's super special about it? And then say, what's everyone going to tell me is wrong with it? And kind of take myself out of that. So it's almost like you're becoming your worst critic before you take it out too, just so it's ready to put in front of other people. You know what I mean?
Every time I do that, someone still says, I could.
Oh yeah, they will. Yeah.
And it's like all night long. And there's the one thing, and that always drives me crazy. I'm like, I don't know how to see that. 2 + 2 is 4. You're 100% right, Gavin, but and that's why it's important. There's always that moment.
Yeah.
And it's better when it's someone that you trust who's going to see that and be like, dude, you're fucking stupid. This is wrong. That's that moment that, you could prepare for it and that, but you'll answer 9 out of 10 other questions from other people who assume that you haven't thought it through. That's where that preparation, I think, really, really comes into play, at least for me.
So let's talk about infrastructure. Matt Green has a question for us too. He's asking how much of real estate infrastructure challenge is the natural competition between the various 5G carriers going to be?
So this is a great question, and it's something that we talk about all the time. So, we look at this as that's actually a good dynamic for us.
Mm-hmm.
And the best, I'm going to crib this from someone on our team, but, the way to think about this is really, it's like digital placemaking. So, we think about it, take it out of the tech sense for a second, the infrastructure sense. we build restaurant spaces, right? We don't make food, but we want to make sure that we have a competitive dynamic that drives the best restaurateurs. You don't just want like a Starbucks next to a Pizza Hut, next to God knows what, like in your market. It's not a mall.
Mhm.
Like
Okay.
where we place make, and what we do is we say, we want to be a curator. We want to build the space and have the best possible service providers. That's what our tenants care about. People move
Right.
into a building not because there's the same coffee shop they can go get anywhere else, but because Robin Mosley went out and found these guys and they've started
Yeah.
this crazy coffee shop and they're obsessed with the quality of the beans and they've got
She's
six
so
different kinds of
amazing.
pour overs. She's
She's
awesome.
so amazing. Yeah.
She's one of my inspirations, like in my life, for how I think about this stuff. And what Robin did for physical placemaking, we're trying to do for digital placemaking, because if I have 3 providers or 4 providers, there's no reason that me as a real estate investor, why they can't coexist to serve my tenants. Like I want to build the best path possible, but I also want to find the right ones and say, hey, based on this competitive dynamic, why don't you try something a little bit different here? Why don't you go above and beyond? Why don't you bring your signal through this entire building that you might not otherwise do? Or
Mhm.
why don't we find a creative way to do something like address the digital divide, or find a way to provide internet service for low income kids near our project? Like, there's always a creativity that can come out of a competitive dynamic. And
Yeah.
for us, at the end of the day, we want to provide the best infrastructure and the path to all those groups, just like we provide the restaurant space. But then we want to find the best restaurateurs and push them to do something different, the same way we will with the 5G providers and
Yeah.
carriers.
Yeah. And you're able to do that in a better position because you own the air.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. So the follow-up part of this, as you're looking at your buildings, whether it's the old ones or the new ones, we talked about the pathways that are already in the building, but do you have to have like express lanes in there? How are you thinking about new developments? Or is it really just, I need some conduit, just like I always did?
It's basically that. And that's the kind of crazy thing. Like,
Yeah.
all right, think about this for a second, right? This is all we're thinking about doing a couple infrastructure pieces, basically fiber, 5G, and the data system it takes to bring it through the buildings. We have
Okay.
the CBRS spectrum, which is the name for the mid-band 5G airwave spectrum that we have. And then we're also thinking about doing 2 data centers, 2 small data centers. And we look at all this stuff. We say these are all things that we can do because we control land, and there are things that we can do to make service more reliable. We can bring redundancy, security, and bring a whole suite of services from outside providers in towards our tenants. And at the end of the day, it's all about facilitation. And one of the
Mhm.
things we learned is outside of the fiber conduit, which is all about consolidating that under the ground and making sure that we have the right loop that's dense to support
Yeah.
all the different things that are going to have to plug in. Because by the way, even though 5G is wireless, each of the antenna needs still to plug in to a fiber optic cable and a power cable.
Right.
So those are the biggest pathway challenges for us, is just thinking through the big underground moves and where those, we're calling them NLEXs or internet exchanges, where they go.
Mhm.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, the beauty of so much of this is that it is wireless. It's that
Yeah.
it runs without need for massive infrastructure. And you think about, why is it so hard for so many companies, especially in the real estate tech space, to make compelling products that really plug into your operations? It's, well, because you either need a massive infrastructure investment, or you just have apps that sort of agglomerate and pull together a bunch of other apps.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, for it to work, like everything has to be connected. It has to be on the same system or on a related system. And so for us, it's saying, well, this
Okay.
is wireless shit. If we want to make the garage gates connect to this, if we want to make the, office suites connect to this, we can do this. We can streamline access control. And that's really the second big vision for all this, is
Yeah.
eventually maybe we can make a more seamless experience for our tenants. It goes beyond just connectivity to say, really, how could you take something like your phone as a connectivity device and use that to go work out in a gym where your membership is connected to your national landing credential,
Yeah.
and then get access to a co-working space where you touch down for the day, pick up your lunch through this. It's all seamless and it's all connected. And then you're a tenant of a neighborhood. You're not just a tenant of a building. That's another way we can leverage our scale.
No, I like that. And look, Ella, my 9-year-old, we were talking about technology in buildings, and I told her I was talking about the show and ideas, and she said, I really think that you need a building that when you walk up to the building, it knows who you are, and it just opens the door, and maybe it asks you a question about the building as a security code, and she's already thinking naturally as extensions how smart a building could be. I think
I mean, Gavin, when's the last
you
time you
know,
used a car key?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And having these all kind of on that same network, I don't think it's not really introducing a single point of failure. It's really introducing like thousands of points of success. Because if I go, especially now, and I've been thinking about this with my good friend Frank Taylor from Compound, buildings need to get a lot easier to go through. The idea that I have to walk in and still sign my name on a piece of paper in a downtown DC building to tell them that I'm there is a ridiculous security measure. I feel like I should be able to, if I'm a guest and I'm going up to see you in your building, I should walk into the building. The person at the front door should know me, whether I'm scanning a code on my phone or it automatically picks up from my phone. and the elevator should know what floor I'm going to because it knew I was going to be there. These should be seamless interactions to go in and out. And you're telling me you could actually make that shit happen.
Yeah, and I think one of their two big it's funny. Look, none of this the reason that we can talk about this is because the framework, it's already there.
Yeah.
People are already thinking like this and other aspects
Right.
of their life work like this. And like everything, office real estate typically is just it's a slow industry, it's a laggard. I had a lot of people ask me at the beginning, well, okay, this is all great, but show me a precedent. It's like, well, no, it's new. That's the whole point. There isn't a precedent in another office building. If it was, it wouldn't be interesting. And so, when we think about this, we have to move beyond the mindset of, well, this is what's done. And all the stuff you talk about, it's 100% possible. It's doable with technology that exists today. I think there are two major roadblocks that we need to think through. One is that, people do care about their privacy. There are times when you walk into a building where maybe you don't want it to know that it's Gavin Daniels going in there.
Agreed.
And there are times
there's
that
no need
you
for
don't
it
want
to
your
know.
face.
Yeah.
There is no need for it to know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things though that you have to reassure people about. When they hear this, they say, well, like my privacy is going to be compromised. And by the way, I think that's a really reasonable and valid concern.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of governance stuff that has to happen to make things truly seamless. Otherwise, you're going to introduce these kind of kludgy little points of failure along the way where it's not going to be seamless anymore. So you really have to think through and understand and be transparent about the privacy policy that goes into everything.
Right.
The second is that so much of because none of this stuff is all connected today, so much of the prop tech industry, I mean, I'll laugh if I see another building app, oh, look, you can make this a seamless experience where it tells you basically, oh, well, you can use your Uber account to call a car, or you can use DoorDash to get some food. It's like, I can already do that on my phone.
Yeah.
I don't need the, insert here JBG building app to do that. And that's bullshit. No one uses it. So for this all to work, you have to really say, hey, we're going to commit to making this all live in kind of the same stack. And by the way, you shouldn't have to have different keys to get into different buildings, to get into different suites, to park your car, to go to a residential building. Like none of that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so you have to streamline it, and you have to make sure that people know that the way they move through that environment is just as private as the way they would have moved through it before.
Yeah, because even if it has to identify you at that moment, it doesn't mean it has to remember you.
Exactly.
So it can go on. So I like that. Look, we've talked for half an hour already. This has been pretty impressive. The last thing that I want to talk about with you is your favorite drink. We talked about this a little bit the other day. Evan, back in the day, introduced me to a drink called the Sazerac, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I believe that says a lot about you and your personality. Tell everybody a little bit about how it's made, and I'll tell you why I think it's important for you.
So it's basically rye, absinthe, and bitters. You can use bourbon, and it's made in 2 glasses. You coat one of the glasses in absinthe, and you basically mix it together. And there's a real artistry, as Gavin loves to point out, how it's all stirred. I remember him sitting there staring back when we used to go to Southern Efficiency together. When I was still there over on 7th Street. And we, this is a neat cocktail because it's the artistry in the way it's made. It's the proportions, just like any other cocktail. But this is something that dates, ostensibly, and you can argue about this, to the 1850s in New Orleans. So it's actually one of the first that was made. And I think it's so cool because it's really about balancing out these really, really different types of flavors and ingredients to create something that's, I think, fairly timeless. And I'm not, I'm not the world's biggest cocktail enthusiast. I'm a little more of a wine drinker, but really this is one that's been enduring for me because, it's something that has an unbelievable amount of history to it. It's got also a craft that's been refined. I mean, think about that. You're refining it over, from 1850 to today. And there aren't that many things. Think about any other thing you interact with in your day-to-day life that goes back to the 1850. I haven't parked a horse lately. It's just so special and different in that sense. And that's one of the reasons I love things that are enduring.
Yeah. No, and I think it's great. And I think it's so you, because it is that artistry. And you do have a really fine aesthetic taste, and I've always appreciated that about you. But it's also how it's made, and the process. You can have good ones, you can have bad ones, and then you light that fire, and how it swirls, and how you blow it out, and how you get the orange peel, and is it the right kind of orange? Is it ripe or not? And that chemical reaction that happens. So that beautiful mix of science and artistry to create something beautiful that also makes you feel a certain way. Evan, I think that's everything you do in real estate, right?
I'd like to think so.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on. I really, really appreciate this. First episode of Gavin's Great Idea. I hope everybody had a great time. We are recording this to tell all your friends. We will be able to, I'll post this on YouTube. And Evan, I hope to have you back. Is there any parting thoughts, any exciting things you want to share with people before we go off?
Well, I think people have heard quite a bit from me today, but I did want to thank you so much for having me on, Gavin. I think this is an awesome podcast. I'm really looking forward to seeing where you take it. Thanks
Great.
again.
Thanks so much. Everyone, have a great weekend. It's supposed to be beautiful weather outside. Get out there, do something, think great ideas. And I'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thanks.
Well, that's a wrap on the first episode of Gavin's Great Idea. Man, that was pretty awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Stay tuned. October 23rd, I'm going to have a new guest on. His name is Brad Ascalon. He's a world-renowned furniture designer and just an amazing person. It's going to be a blast. We're going to have fun. So pay attention. October 23rd, 10 a.m. on a Friday. It's going to be fun. Watch my LinkedIn, watch your email, and you'll be getting a link for it. And of course, I'll be posting it just like I am this one. Hope you guys are doing great. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.